In the corner of a polished glass conference room, Amara Benson sat quietly, her posture straight, her notebook open, her pen steady. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows, cutting the room into sharp lines of light and shadow. Around her sat men in navy suits, crisp shirts, silk ties, voices heavy with confidence and caffeine. They talked fast, interrupted faster, and never once looked in her direction. She was 26, the youngest associate in the firm, and the only black woman in the room. Her job, according to them, was to take notes, to listen, to stay invisible. But Amara wasn't built for invisibility. When the senior partner tossed a stack of papers onto the table and said, "This is the contract draft for tomorrow's merger," she reached for them without hesitation. "I reviewed the numbers last night," she said calmly. "Clause 14C could expose us to liability if—" She didn't finish. The senior partner, Mr. Lang, laughed softly, that slow, patronizing laugh that filled the air like smoke. "Sweetheart," he said, sliding the papers away from her hands, "we'll handle the real work. You can keep taking notes." The men around him chuckled. Polite, quiet laughter, the kind that said, "This is normal." Amara froze for half a second, her pen still poised in the air. The silence that followed was sharp, uncomfortable, heavy with what wasn't said. She could feel the heat rising behind her ears, the weight of every eye in the room. Some amused, some avoiding hers entirely. But she didn't break. Her pen lowered, her face unreadable. "Understood," she said softly, her voice even, almost gentle. Then she wrote something down in her notebook, not notes from the meeting, but words for herself. They think silence means surrender. Let's see what silence builds. The meeting dragged on. Mr. Lang spoke about projections, risk analysis, profit margins. Every word felt inflated, every sentence wrapped in arrogance. The men nodded, agreed, repeated each other's points like echoes in an empty hall. Amara watched them, her expression calm, but her mind racing. She knew the merger details better than anyone in that room. She'd spent nights combing through tax structures, offshore holdings, and foreign subsidiaries. She knew that Clause 14C wasn't just a risk, it was a ticking bomb. But no one wanted to hear that from her. She glanced at the reflection of herself in the glass wall, small, centered in a sea of suits and certainty. They talked about billions, but they didn't see value when it sat right next to them. "Benson!" Lang barked suddenly. "Coffee run? We're low!" She blinked once, slowly, then stood. "Of course." She turned, heels clicking against the marble floor, and left the room. But in the hallway her expression changed. The controlled politeness fell away. Her jaw set. Her eyes hardened. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the contract lying open on the table, just enough to remind her of what she was about to fix. That night, when the office emptied and the city lights painted streaks across the glass, Amara was still there. The coffee gone cold beside her, the laughter from earlier replaced by the hum of the building's air conditioning. Her reflection stared back at her from the screen as she opened the file and began to rewrite. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, surgical, precise. Every clause, every comma, every oversight they'd made, she corrected, adjusted, protected. Not for them, for herself. When the clock struck 2 a.m., she saved the document, not under the firm's shared drive, but under a secure registration portal, her name in the metadata, her timestamp sealed. Tomorrow, they'd present their version to the CEO, the one she'd been told to stay out of. But only one version of that contract would matter, and it wasn't the one they thought. She leaned back in her chair, the city glowing behind her. Her silence earlier wasn't submission. It was strategy. Power, she knew, didn't always shout across a boardroom table. Sometimes it just waited, wrote, and signed in ink no one else saw. She whispered to herself, "We'll handle the real work, sweetheart," repeating his words with a smirk. "Yes, we will." Then she smiled, the quiet smile of someone who already knows how the story ends. The office was silent long after the city outside had gone to sleep. Fluorescent lights hummed softly above rows of empty desks, casting long reflections across glass walls and chrome. In the middle of that hollow quiet sat Amara Benson, the junior associate nobody noticed after hours. Her suit jacket hung over the back of her chair. Her braids were slightly undone, and the glow of her monitor painted her skin in tones of gold and blue. The document she had been assigned, the one Mr. Lang had ripped from her hands earlier that morning, was open again. But this time it was hers. Her fingers moved across the keyboard in a rhythm that sounded almost like breathing, calm, steady, deliberate. Somewhere, a cleaning crew pushed a vacuum down the hall. Somewhere, an elevator chimed, but inside her office, time didn't exist. Only words, clauses, and precision. They had told her to leave the real work to them. And she had, until they left the room. The cursor blinked beside a line of text that would change everything. Clause 14.7, a quiet protection buried in the fine print, invisible to anyone who didn't look twice. It was an adjustment so small, so subtle, that no one on the partner floor would ever notice it until it was too late. She paused for a moment, staring at the line. Her reflection in the glass behind her looked back, tired, composed, unshaken. "Sweetheart," he had called her. She let the word replay once, just once, before pressing delete. Gone. Replaced by silence. The kind of silence that thinks before it strikes. Midnight passed. The city outside blinked with traffic and neon. Somewhere across the skyline, the towers of Lang and Foster still glowed, their logo stretching over the night like a crown. She didn't look at it. She didn't need to. The Empire would never see her coming. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but she didn't care. Every keystroke carried weight, every comma and period a step toward inevitability. She saved the file once, twice, then printed a clean copy. The sound of the printer echoed in the stillness, paper sliding into the tray like whispers. She signed her initials at the bottom. A.B., not arrogance, just record. The file name blinked on her screen. Master Contract Revision Amara Benson, Docs. She minimized it, replaced it with the old draft, the one Lang and his team still believed was final. Her expression didn't change. She simply clicked send and leaned back. The clock read 1:47 a.m. Her reflection merged with the city lights outside. One woman surrounded by glass but unseen by everyone who thought they ruled the floor. The silence around her wasn't weakness. It was armor. She knew tomorrow they would laugh again, dismiss her again, tell her again what she didn't understand. And she would nod, take her notes, and wait. Because real power doesn't announce itself in boardrooms or shout across tables. It writes itself quietly, in footnotes and signatures, in moments no one bothers to witness. Somewhere, in another office, Mr. Lang's name glowed on a corner plaque. Gold letters, heavy and sure. He believed control meant volume, that the louder voice always won. Amara smiled faintly, closing her laptop. "We'll see," she whispered to the empty room. Then she stood, smoothing her sleeves, gathering the quiet like a weapon. By morning, her small revision would be filed, reviewed, and approved without question. They would sign it, notarize it, send it to the client, and never realize whose hands had shaped it. The silence followed her down the hallway, past the portraits of founders, past the glass doors that reflected her calm face. No anger, no bitterness, just certainty. Outside, the city lights met her eyes like sparks waiting for fire. Power didn't need to roar tonight, it only needed to wait, and Amara Benson knew exactly how to wait. The office was empty when control quietly changed hands. Outside, the partners were at the bar, laughing too loudly, toasting the deal they thought they owned. Inside, Amara Benson sat alone, her fingers steady on the keyboard, the blue light of the screen glinting in her eyes like steel. Every click was deliberate, Every clause, a boundary, a weapon, a warning. She opened the contract they had mocked her for touching, the one they said was too advanced for her to handle, and began to rewrite history line by line. The men had signed the old version, the one riddled with blind spots, but Amara had already rewritten it, adjusted the language, and filed the updated contract under a new submission, one that bore her name and her legal fingerprint. Clause 17B, she whispered, reading the line that shifted ownership rights. Effective upon registration. She didn't need an audience. She needed precision. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat, patient, rhythmic, certain. Somewhere down the street, glasses clinked. Someone called her name in a toast she'd never hear. But in this room, silence was power, and Amara was its architect. On the wall, the clock struck midnight. In the digital records of the corporate filing system, the ownership of a multi-million-dollar deal realigned, quietly, perfectly, lawfully. No fanfare, no signatures in gold pens, just a digital trail of competence the others never saw coming. She leaned back, exhaled slowly, and saved the file. Control, she murmured, watching the word appear on her screen in the file name. Now it's mine. The printer hummed softly in the corner as the papers emerged, warm and final. She signed her name once, neatly, the black ink clean against the page. She placed the document into a folder embossed with the firm's crest and slid it into the outgoing tray marked Filed and Approved. The irony almost made her smile. They'd mocked her, dismissed her, taken her silence for surrender. But silence doesn't surrender. It studies, it listens, it plans. In the reflection of the glass, her face looked calm, not triumphant, not bitter, just sure. The kind of sure that comes from knowing you don't need to raise your voice to own the room. When she turned off the monitor, the glow faded, leaving only the faint hum of machines, the aftersound of revolution disguised as routine. By morning, when the partners returned, hungover and triumphant, the papers would already be filed, time-stamped, and locked in the corporate archives. And the woman they'd called sweetheart would own the only version of the truth that mattered, the legal one. They thought control came from speaking the loudest. Amara had proven it comes from knowing exactly when to stay quiet and exactly where to sign your name. The boardroom was chaos wrapped in glass. Phones were ringing, voices colliding, the air thick with disbelief. On the far wall, a ticker scrolled in red, numbers plunging, fortunes burning in real time. The deal they celebrated just hours ago was gone. $2 million in penalties, 3 partners under investigation, and every eye turned toward her. Amara Benson stood at the edge of the storm, calm, still, unshaken. The CEO, red-faced and desperate, slammed his palm on the table. "What the hell happened?" he shouted. "Who changed the contract?" The room fell silent. Amara didn't flinch. She looked at him, not with defiance, not with fear, but with the cool composure of someone who had already done the math. "You told me to let the big boys handle it," she said softly. "So I did, and then I fixed it." He blinked, unsure if he heard her right. "Fixed it?" he barked. "You ruined us." She tilted her head slightly, her tone still calm. "No, I protected us. You just didn't read the fine print." Murmurs spread around the table. One of the executives scrolled through the document on his tablet, his eyes widening. "The registration," he whispered. "It's under her name." The CEO froze. "That's impossible." But it wasn't. The system didn't lie. The contract, the very one that secured the company's assets, had been refiled and time-stamped. Amara Benson, registered owner, legal controller, irrevocable for 90 days. The air shifted. The silence was heavy now, almost reverent. She didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She just stood there, hands folded in front of her, as if attending her own quiet coronation. "You wanted control," she said finally, "so I learned what it really looks like." The CEO stared at her, pale, his authority unraveling thread by thread. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he said. She met his gaze. "Yes," she replied. "I documented everything." He took a step forward, desperate. "You can't just—" "I can," she interrupted, her voice cutting through the noise with surgical precision. "Because while you were laughing, I was reading. While you were talking, I was recording. While you were ignoring me, I was making sure your empire couldn't stand without the woman you dismissed." The words hung in the air, slow and deliberate, the kind that bruise before they heal. The CEO sank back into his chair, the sound of defeat louder than any apology could have been. "You underestimated me," she said, quieter now, almost to herself. "I took notes." The phrase rippled through the room like a verdict. No anger, no triumph, just balance, the scales correcting themselves at last. Cameras flashed from the hallway. Someone was already leaking the story. But Amara didn't look at them. She gathered her folder, the same one they mocked her for carrying, and turned toward the door. Her heels clicked against the marble, steady, precise, final. Behind her, voices rose again, frantic, pleading. But she didn't turn back. Her silence said everything. It wasn't revenge. It was resolution. The kind of justice that doesn't T-scream, it signs its name at the bottom of the page. The office was still humming with the sound of panic when she stood. Papers scattered across the long conference table, screens flashing red, voices overlapping, a storm of confusion that no one could calm. But Amara didn't move like the others. She gathered her folder, closed her pen, and straightened her jacket as if finishing an ordinary workday. No triumph, no smirk, no gloating, just silence. The same silence they once mistook for weakness. As she walked toward the elevator, every step echoed through the glass halls, the same halls where she used to be invisible. Now, every whisper followed her. Her heels clicked like punctuation marks, each one closing a chapter they never saw her writing. Behind her, Mr. Lang's voice trembled. "Wait, Benson. We can fix this." But she didn't stop. She didn't need to. The deal was over. The signatures were sealed, and the empire that had dismissed her had already begun to crumble under the weight of her precision. She passed the office portraits, rows of men who had once told her how the world worked. And in her reflection on the glass, she didn't see the assistant they'd underestimated. She saw the architect of consequence. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. She stepped inside, the light spilling across her face, calm and sure. As the doors closed, the chaos above her faded into a hum, distant, irrelevant. Outside, the city stretched below her, alive with motion, unaware that a billion-dollar empire had just fallen in silence. Her phone buzzed once, a message from a journalist. "Statement?" She typed 3 words and hit send. Never interrupt the quiet woman reading the fine print. Then she slipped the phone into her pocket, lifted her chin, and walked into the morning light, not as someone who took revenge, but as someone who rewrote the definition of power. Because true strength doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention. It waits, it calculates, and when the moment comes, it signs the final line, smiles, and leaves the room without a sound. As Amara steps into the elevator, the doors close with a soft, metallic sigh. Final. Echoing. Behind those glass walls, chaos brews. Partners whisper, phones ring, reputations tremble. But she doesn't look back. The city glows below her, endless and alive, and for the first time, the silence feels like victory. Her phone vibrates. A new message. "We'd like to offer you a position at our firm. Name your terms." She smiles faintly, slips the phone back into her pocket and whispers to herself, "Never interrupt the quiet woman reading the fine print." Because in a world that underestimates women like her, silence isn't weakness, It's a weapon. If this story hit you somewhere deep, tell me which moment did it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with someone who's ever been underestimated, and subscribe for more stories that prove one truth. Respect isn't requested. It's earned, quietly.